He didn't even know the rules properly, and walked away from the table with $1,000,000, just like that. A click on the app, a handful of bets he couldn't even explain, and bam, $1,000,000 deposit flashing on his phone screen. Sounds like a movie plot, right? But it's real, and crazier than it seems. We're talking about a 19-year-old kid who just days ago spent his time playing video games, goofing around with his friends, and listening to his mom ask if he was gonna do something with his life. Believe it or not, he didn't even believe what happened. On a bored whim, he decided to join an online poker table with a $10 chip. He didn't even know what straight meant. Confused call with fold, thought bluff was just something from mafia movies. And still, he won. He won big. He won in style. He won like someone who didn't even know he was. Playing for real. Now picture this. He's sitting on the bed, in his ripped hoodie, with his phone almost out of battery and the Wi-Fi dropping. And out of nowhere, last hand, just him and one other player. His heart racing, his hands sweating. The sound of a cheap fan whirring in the background. One click, another. All in. Silence. The screen flashes. You won! At first, he thought it was a glitch. He refreshed the page, looked again. Million. Real. Cash. And the most unbelievable part, he didn't even want to win. He just wanted to see how it worked. Just wanted to play for fun. But something happened in that fun. Something that flipped the switch. Something even the pros didn't expect. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the courage to jump in without knowing everything. And before you think it was just luck or a modern-day fairy tale, let me show you who this kid was before it all. Before the light bulb went off. Before the game even started. Before fate shuffled the cards of his life. Before all of this, before the click, before the prize, before the world flipped upside down, he was just another face in the crowd. The kind of guy you wouldn't notice if you walked past him on the street. Recently graduated from high school, no solid plans, living in a simple house with his parents and 2 siblings. His room was cramped with a mattress on the floor and a makeshift desk in the corner, where he'd spend hours playing video games and messing around on the old computer that always froze. Sometimes the Wi-Fi would drop. Sometimes life would freeze up too. The future? A blur. There were days he didn't even think about it. I'll figure it out later, he'd say. That classic procrastination we've all used at least once. No classes, no steady job, no certainties. He had a resume floating around at the local shops, but no responses yet. The bank account balance was a number that barely mattered. His mom always asked if he wanted to try something. His dad just said, "Your time will come." But no one imagined that this time would knock on his door so soon. The truth is, what he really loved was the digital world. He'd always been a bit introverted, but when he turned on the computer, it was like the world came to life. He'd spend entire nights playing, watching gameplay videos, editing images, messing with music. But none of it had a real purpose. It was just a hobby. It was an escape. It was the place where he felt good, where no one expected anything, where no one judged. And of course, every now and then, there'd be the usual banter with his friends. The neighborhood crew would always laugh at him. "Gonna live off playing games now, huh?" they'd say. "Poker? That's for old boring guys, man. Get out of here." And he'd laugh too, because deep down he didn't take it seriously. He didn't know anyone who actually played poker. Whenever he heard about it, it was always in some old movie, with guys in suits smoking cigars in neon lit casinos. He never thought that was for him. He couldn't picture himself there. He didn't belong. His routine was almost always the same. Wake up late, have some coffee with milk and stale bread, open the laptop, and start browsing. Every now and then he'd check out the classifieds but quickly get distracted. It was hard for him to imagine doing what everyone else was doing. Working at the supermarket, being a pharmacy cashier. No offense, but he didn't feel like that was where he'd thrive. And at the same time, he had no idea where he would thrive. That uncertainty was a constant weight on his chest. One of those silent weights, you know, the kind you carry with a smile. But that pushes you down without warning. His parents didn't pressure him too much, but their looks said more than words ever could. And that hurts more sometimes. He tried not to show it, but he knew he was the aimless one in the family, the let's see what happens. While his friends were already in college, starting internships, doing prep courses, he still hadn't figured himself out. And to make matters worse, he didn't feel good enough at anything. But if there's one thing that's always been inside him, even if hidden, it's that restlessness. That spark everyone has somewhere inside. The kind of thing you don't see but feel. It shows up when you least expect it. He'd always had a thing for trying new things. He tried selling digital drawings online, made video edits for friends, thought about being a DJ, starting a YouTube channel, even tried live streaming while gaming, but he never followed through. Was it lack of motivation? Maybe. Lack of money? Definitely. But above all, it was the lack of believing that something different could be possible for him. He grew up hearing that a good life is a safe life, that the right thing is to do the basics well, that those who try too hard end up frustrated, and he swallowed it. He accepted it, like swallowing a bitter pill because they say it's the best. And it's at this point that many people will relate, because it's not a rare story, it's common, it's real, it's made of flesh and bone. How many young people today are exactly like that, lost between what they like and what they need to do? Surrounded by expectations, but without direction, living life on autopilot, waiting for a sign, a chance, a spark. And it was exactly during one of those ordinary nights, with nothing special happening, that spark appeared for him. It wasn't at some epic event. It wasn't at a motivational speech. It was just a click, a silly, impulsive, curious click. A random YouTube video, a streamer playing poker live, a chat conversation that caught his eye. And right there, unknowingly, the story started to change. But to understand what made that video so special, we need to go back to the moment when poker sneaked in, quietly, as if it didn't matter, and lit up a light in a room that had been dark for a long time. It all started on just any random night, the kind where sleep just won't come and your mind seems to want to run a marathon at 3 a.m. The blue light of the laptop was the only thing glowing in the room. Headphones cranked up, one tab on YouTube, another on Discord, and about 3 more things open without much purpose. It was just another regular night for him, aimless, in no rush, with no plans. Scrolling through his timeline, clicking here and there until the algorithm hit the bullseye, a live stream, live, with thousands of people watching a guy play poker online. The title? Turning $10 into $10,000 live. That caught his attention in a weird way. It wasn't the kind of content he usually watched, but something about it hooked him. Maybe it was the streamer's style, charismatic, quick, and provocative. Maybe it was the challenge itself, the idea that with a small amount, you could do something big. But above all, it was the emotion, the vibe, the adrenaline of the virtual table, the chat comments, the exaggerated reactions from the player. It felt like a show. and that hit a place inside him he didn't even know existed. He watched for almost 2 hours, mesmerized. He saw bold moves, incredible bluffs, losses that hurt even the ones just watching. There was one moment when the streamer lost a hand because of a tiny detail, and even then he smiled, laughed, patted his chest and said, "It's part of the game. We'll go again tomorrow." That stayed with him. The ease with which the guy dealt with failure and risk. It was the complete opposite of the paralysis he felt in his own life. There he was, stuck, afraid of failing, afraid of trying. And, on the other side of the screen, a guy risking everything with a pair of cards. It might sound like an exaggeration, but at that moment, something clicked. He didn't really understand what it was. He just knew he wanted to try. Not for the money, not for fame. Just on impulse, out of curiosity, and most of all, out of the need to feel something different. To feel alive. Without thinking much, he downloaded a free poker app. The kind that's super simple, with fake chips and generic avatars. The interface was confusing, full of numbers and terms he'd never seen. Big blind, flush, turn, c-bet? What the heck is this? But he went for it anyway. Clicked on Play Now. And joined any table without reading the rules, without even knowing what he was doing. The first hand came. He looked at it and thought, all right, 2 cards. I'll click here. He played and won. Didn't even understand how. In the next round, he lost everything. He laughed to himself. The experience was strange but addictive. He played for about 3 hours that night, non-stop. Sometimes he'd win a hand and think he was starting to get it. The next move, he'd mess up and lose. But strangely, that didn't discourage him. It was like the game, even without him fully understanding it, sparked something in him that no other hobby had. The next day, with his head still full of images from the stream and his play from the night before, he decided to put in $10 for real, actual money. The money from a Pix transfer he'd saved from a poorly paid freelance gig he did a while back. I'll just see how it really works, he thought. Opened the app, made the deposit, and entered his first real table. The difference was huge. The players were faster, more aggressive. The chips disappeared in the blink of an eye. He played, lost. Played again, lost again. In less than 20 minutes, his $10 were gone. The feeling was mixed, a little frustration, a little anger, but also a strange satisfaction. Because even losing, he was doing something. He was moving. It was like someone who'd never gone in the ocean and finally jumps in. Even if they get a mouthful of water, they come back to the shore with a smile on their face. In the following days, he kept joining free tables, watching videos, reading comments on forums. He still didn't understand the technical terms, but he was starting to notice patterns. He paid attention to the streamers' expressions, the pauses they made before betting, the reactions from the chat. It all seemed to have an invisible logic, as if poker wasn't just about cards, but about reading people, about psychology, about timing. And that fascinated him, because deep down, he'd always been good at observing, noticing details. He was the kind of person who could tell when someone was lying just by the way they raised an eyebrow. And there in poker, that seemed like an advantage. He started to wonder if what he'd thought was just luck might actually have a lot more strategy behind it than he'd realized. That's when he had a realization. What if I actually studied this? Not to become a professional player, not yet, but to understand, to see if there was more to it than just a game. He started looking for beginner-focused channels on YouTube. He watched basic lessons about table positions, types of bets, how to identify good hands, how to avoid traps. The videos that once seemed boring now held his attention. He'd pause, take notes, try to apply what he learned in free games. He felt like he was improving. Slowly, yes, but with awareness. And it was in this rhythm that what he called his mini poker routine was born. Every day, half an hour of videos, 1 hour of practice. He started to see the game as a mirror of life. Sometimes you get bad cards, but if you know how to play, you can turn things around. Sometimes you have a great hand, but you overdo it and lose everything. He learned right there that emotional control is worth more than any high card. One day, while watching a lesson about probabilities on the river, the instructor said something that stuck with him. Poker is like life. Those who make better decisions in the long run win. That made him pause the video and stare at the ceiling. Because without even realizing it, the game started changing how he saw his own life. He realized he was always waiting for the perfect hand to act. Always postponing, always afraid of making a mistake. But what if the secret was in acting even with mediocre cards? In accepting that making mistakes is part of the process, and that not playing is the biggest mistake. This shift in mindset didn't happen overnight, but it started building, one bet at a time, one red at a time, one loss at a time. And here's where a subtle yet powerful change happens, because even without big wins yet, he'd already gained something precious: motivation. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was building something. It wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a journey, a little staircase, something he could climb, even if he didn't know where it would lead. And maybe that's the most important part of all. He didn't start playing to make money. He started playing to feel alive, to feel in control of something. And that, my friend, changes everything. Because when you find something that pulls you out of inertia, that challenges you and makes you want to learn, even without any guarantee of success, you've found gold. But like any real journey, the path wouldn't be all excitement and wins. After the initial rush came the falls, the frustrations, the days when the game seems to laugh in your face, the moments when everything you thought you knew collapses with one flipped card. And this is where the story takes on deeper layers. Because what he went through right after wasn't just a rough phase. It was a true crossing of the desert. And if you've ever tried to change your life, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The initial excitement is a silent trap. It whispers in your ear that now you've got it all figured out, that the worst is over, that you were born for this. And that's exactly how he felt. After a few days of playing free tables, consuming content, winning hands, and understanding the fundamentals better, that dangerous confidence appeared. The voice inside that says, "Go for it. This time it's different." He believed it. He reloaded the app, put in another $10, his last investment, as he put it. The goal? To test if all that recent study had really paid off. The first table seemed calm, and right away he made a good move. He won. His heart raced. His mind began to fantasize. What if? But the what if turned into too late, really quickly. Within minutes, a series of bad hands, wrong decisions, impatient bets, and poof, everything evaporated. The $10 vanished without even giving him time to breathe. He stared at the screen in silence. The room was dark, only the blue light from his phone illuminating his face. No sound, no movement. Just that familiar feeling of frustration hitting his chest. The one that says, "Why did you think it would work out?" That old companion that comes every time we try something new and get disappointed. In the following days, the story repeated itself. $5 here, $8 there, another $10 deposit. In every attempt, the end was the same: defeat. Sometimes it was because of a hasty move, other times from poor reading, and often just bad luck. The fact was, the losses started to pile up, not just in his balance, but in his self-esteem. He started doubting his own ability. That spark that kept him awake before turned into an ember slowly dying out. He thought about uninstalling the app. He thought about quitting poker. He even thought about accepting that maybe this just wasn't for him. And as if the internal fall wasn't enough, there came the external one, the crueler one. His friends found out he was trying to play poker. At first, it was just light teasing. "You think you're the next Daniel Negreanu, huh?" But over time, the jokes grew heavier. "Lost again. Maybe that's your thing." Or, "Why don't you try being an Uber driver instead of trying to get rich from that game?" They were just jokes, but they hit deep. With every laugh, he felt more and more distant from what he'd briefly believed was possible. He started hiding the fact that he was still playing. He'd join tables when no one was home, watch videos in incognito mode, close everything when someone came near. What had once been excitement turned into shame, and that, perhaps, hurt more than any financial loss. This phase of falls and failures messed with everything in him. His ego, his self-confidence, his motivation. He started wondering if he was just feeding an illusion, if this was just another one of those disposable dreams we collect in our youth. Because we grow up hearing that failure is part of the process, but no one teaches you what to do when failure becomes routine. No one explains the bitter taste of trying and failing 5 times in a row. And worse, failing in front of others. He started to fear trying again. He didn't want to deal with that feeling of defeat anymore, with the hidden laughter from his friends, with his own internal judgments. The phrase he repeated most to himself was, "It's over. I've tried. It didn't work." But deep down, way deep down, he still wanted to believe. There was still a little fire left in him, a last bit of curiosity, a final spark of what if. He remembered the streamer who lost live and still smiled. He remembered the hands he won early on when he was playing for fun. And he began to ask himself, what changed since then? The answer hit him like a punch to the stomach. The weight. In the beginning, he played without pressure, without a goal. He played out of curiosity, wanting to learn. Afterward, he played with weight, with expectations, with fear. And that, in poker and in life, changes everything. The mind gets heavy, decisions go sideways, focus gets lost. The fear of making a mistake becomes the mistake itself. That's when he had one of those moments of clarity. It wasn't anything cinematic, no soundtrack, but it was real. He looked at himself in the mirror, in that bathroom with old tiles, and quietly said to himself, "It's okay to have lost. But what if I try something different this time?" And it wasn't about investing more money or playing more aggressively. It was about going back to the basics, relearning, starting over. No rush, no comparisons, no expectation of getting rich in one night. He decided to take a step back, but with more awareness. He uninstalled the app for a while, went back to, the videos, grabbed a notebook and started writing down concepts. Created a study group, just for himself, returned to free tables, He started playing with a focus on analysis, not on winning. And look, he still lost. But now every loss came with a lesson. He wrote it down. I messed up here because I was impatient. This hand wasn't worth the risk. I didn't read my opponent well. Over time, the pain of losing was replaced by a different kind of satisfaction. The satisfaction of understanding, of learning, of growing. He started noticing patterns that used to slip by. He recognized traps, saw bluffs coming. His intuition became strategy. And his desire to play grew again, but in a more mature way. Like someone who respects the game, not someone who wants to dominate it. At this point in the story, failure stopped being the enemy. It became the teacher. A tough teacher, yes. Demanding, but fair. Because poker, like life, charges a high price for those who want shortcuts. But it rewards those who learn from the journey. And it was with this new rhythm, with humility and consistency, that he started to climb again. Not as someone desperate for money, but as someone passionate about improving. One day, he entered a free tournament just to practice. He made it to the top 50. The next time, he got into the top 20. On a Sunday afternoon, without expecting anything, he ended up in the top 10. And there, for the first time in a long time, he felt something different. Genuine confidence. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't show off, but quietly lives deep in your chest and says, keep going. You're on the right path. And it's right here that the story gains new momentum. Because after so many falls, he finally began to rise. And this climb, my friend, this one is worth paying attention to. Because what came next, the tournament, the turnaround, the impossible, only made sense because of the pain he chose to face. And when you find out what happened that absurd night, you'll understand why all this suffering was worth it. There comes a point when you look in the mirror and realize, either you keep standing still complaining, or you get up and learn to play with the cards you have. And that's exactly what he did. After so many losses, so many jokes, so many doubts swallowed in silence, he decided, not with euphoria but with determination, that he wasn't going to quit. It was like a spark lit up again, but this time with less flash and more steady ember. And the first step of this climb wasn't going all in again. It was studying. He locked himself in a world most people ignore, the basics. He went back to watching videos he'd already seen, but this time with a different perspective. He wrote everything down, which hands are good in which positions, how probabilities work, how to control tilt. He created a notebook just for this. He started to understand that poker wasn't about having luck. It was about making better decisions than others in the long run. And that realization changed the game. While his friends were at the bar, he was watching a lesson on ICM. While people laughed at bad bluffs, he was learning how to read ranges. Not because he wanted to prove something to anyone, but because, for the first time, he was investing in himself. He created a training routine. He focused on free tables, but he played as if they were worth millions. He repeated moves, tested strategies. He analyzed his own hands critically. I forced it here. I was too hasty here. He even started recording himself playing, to review later and understand where he was going wrong. An effort few are brave enough to make, because it takes humility. It takes facing your own mistakes without excuses. But he did. And it was in this process that he started to reap small victories, not of money, but of real progress. One day he entered a low-cost tournament almost by accident. It was a free roll with a small prize, but the goal wasn't to win. It was to test everything he'd been training. From the start, he played calmly. He observed his opponent's patterns. He waited. He knew when to press. He made it past the first phase, then the second. Before he knew it, he was in the top 50. His heart was beating differently. His breathing was different. Not because of the prize value, but because, for the first time, he felt in control. He wasn't just a player reacting to the cards. He was someone making conscious decisions. He made it to the top 20, then the top 10. He didn't win, but he left with something more valuable than any chips. True confidence. The kind that comes from effort, dedication, real evolution. And this confidence started to reflect in everything. In the way he spoke, in the sparkle in his eyes, in the way he sat down in front of the computer. It was like life was finally giving a sign of return. The room was still the same. The computer still froze sometimes. But inside, everything had changed. He had a goal now. He had focus. He knew what he wanted. And most importantly, he knew what he didn't want anymore. He didn't want to go back to playing impulsively. He didn't want to lose himself in frustration. He didn't want to be the guy who quits at the first difficult turn.
And that made him dangerous at the table, in a good way. Because when a player has emotional control and clarity of strategy, they become a problem for their opponents. And he started noticing this at the tables. Players folding to his bluffs.
Hands won with precise reading, chips slowly accumulating. No rush, no desperation. One step at a time. And you know what's most curious? He started enjoying the process more than the result. Yes, he wanted to win. Yes, he wanted the prize. But what drove him now was the feeling of evolving. Every day, he learned something new. Every hand became a lesson. He started following professional players on Instagram, joined discussion groups, commented on forums. And more than that, he started helping other beginners. That kid who just weeks ago didn't even know what a big blind was, now explained concepts that scare a lot of people with clarity. And this reinforced his journey even more. Because when you teach, you learn twice. When you share, you solidify. And he was doing it with passion, but the peak of his climb would come on just any random night, the kind no one expects. A notification on his phone alerted him to a low-entry tournament, or $10. He almost ignored it. He was tired. But something inside him said, "Go. Just play. Just for today." And he did. What he didn't know was that this tournament would be different. That everything he had gone through until then, all the falls, all the hours of study, all the small victories, was setting the stage for what was to come next. Because the game sometimes rewards not the one with the most luck, but the one who persists the longest. And that night, oh, that night, was the beginning of everything you're about to see in the next chapter. There are nights that arrive like any other, but leave a mark like no other. It was a regular Wednesday. The sky was a little cloudy, the cold wind blowing through the crack in the window, and that silence of a house that seems to whisper that nothing special will happen. He was there, like so many other nights, sitting in the uncomfortable chair, wearing the same worn hoodie as always, a half-finished cup of reheated coffee, and his phone by his side with 8% battery. No big expectations, no wild plans, just a small desire to play and clear his mind. That's when the notification popped up. Special tournament, buy-in $10, progressive prize. He looked at it with suspicion, thought about ignoring it. but something. Maybe instinct. Maybe fate told him, go. And he went. He joined the tournament more out of habit than motivation. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew that, with such a low buy-in, many experienced players would take advantage to fish for beginners. But he also knew he wasn't the same beginner he used to be. In the first few hands, he played cautiously, avoided risks, studied his opponent's behavior. He noticed that some played with unnecessary aggression. He used that to his advantage. He started building his stack with patience. He didn't get excited about small victories and didn't panic over losses. He was centered, focused. With every level he passed, the number of players decreased, and he kept going strong, like someone who knows they're exactly where they should be. Halfway through the tournament came the first big move. He was in the big blind. He got a 7 and 9 of the same suit. Most people would fold. But he noticed a pattern in the opponent. To his left, every time everyone checked, he would raise, no matter the hand. He decided to call just to observe. The flop came with 8, 10, and 6, an open straight, and his heart skipped a beat. The opponent made a big bet, trying to intimidate. He just called. The turn, 5. The straight was completed. He held back his excitement, feigned doubt, and checked hesitantly. The other went all in. He called. When the cards turned, it was like the whole room shook. Clean victory, strategic. A move that was only possible because he studied, because he fell and learned, because he grew. From that moment on, it was as if everything was working in his favor. But not by magic, by preparation. He kept himself among the top players without taking unnecessary risks. He played calmly, with precision. He knew when to speed up and when to hold back. And the most amazing part, he seemed to be enjoying it. Even under pressure, even with the prize growing, he laughed to himself, murmured nice under his breath, gestured with his hands as if he were in a live tournament. The adrenaline grew with every hand, but his mind remained focused. When he made it to the top 100, he started getting messages from eliminated players. Great play, beautiful hand, nice read. That gave him more energy than any virtual chip could. He made it to the top 20 like someone who already knew the path. It wasn't a surprise anymore. It was a job well done. Every decision, every bet, every fold, it was part of a bigger strategy. At the final table, only 9 players were left. The chat exploded with comments. The prize had already surpassed everything he had won up to that point. His hands were sweaty, his heart racing. But he remembered everything he had studied. Emotional control, patience. He didn't let himself get carried away by euphoria. He played as if he were still in that free phase, practicing against bots. One by one the players fell, until only 2 remained, the famous heads-up, a duel. One-on-one. Him versus a player with a foreign nickname, a slightly bigger stack, a history of victories in other tournaments. The kind of final that felt like a movie. The opponent was aggressive. He played with pressure. He made big raises, bluffed constantly. He watched, took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't fall into the other player's rhythm. He had to stick to his own. In a decisive hand, he got an ace and 4. The flop came with ace, 4, and queen. 2 pairs. Strong, but risky. The opponent went all in immediately. Silence. Held breath. A tough decision. After seconds that felt like minutes, he clicked, call. When the cards were revealed, the world stopped. The opponent had queen and jack, just a pair. He won, not just the hand. He won the tournament. He won the fear. He won the doubt. The screen displayed the message. You are the champion. And right there, in that moment frozen in time, everything made sense. Every sleepless night, every video watched, every note in his notebook, every loss, every laugh from others, everything. Every detail had brought him to that point. The bank account now showed a number he had never seen in his life. But more than the money, what filled his chest was the feeling of legitimate accomplishment. He looked around. Everything was still the same. The messy room, the uncomfortable chair, the cold coffee. But he wasn't the same. He laughed. Then he cried. Then he laughed again. He picked up his phone, took a screenshot of the result. Not to post, but to keep. As a reminder of the day he won, in the game and in life. Because in that moment, he wasn't just the guy who played poker. He was the guy who believed, who persisted, who decided to keep going even when everything told him to stop. And now it was time to figure out what to do with all of it. Because winning is just the beginning. What you do after the win, that's what builds the true story. He stared at the screen as if he were waiting for the number to disappear. Over 1 million reais. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't a fake screenshot from a Telegram group. It was real. It was his. That number flashing in the corner of the screen wasn't just a prize. It was the living proof that life can change in one night. And it did. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the old fan seemed to stop working. He stayed there, motionless, trying to understand what had just happened. His head was boiling. His breath was short. His entire body was shaking as if his nervous system itself was trying to update to match the new reality. When it finally sank in, the emotion exploded. He screamed. He laughed. He cried. All at once. It was an involuntary reaction, as if every cell in his body needed to release everything. He threw his phone on the mattress, got up from the chair, and paced around aimlessly, hands on his head, saying, "This can't be real. This can't be real." And it was. Every step he took in the small room echoed as if he were walking into a new world. He picked up his phone again, looked at the screen. He pressed F5, refreshed. The amount was still there. Real. Literally. But what impressed him the most wasn't the money itself. It was the feeling of having won, of having made it happen, alone, against everything, against everyone. His mind automatically went back to the beginning of the journey. He remembered the first day he saw the streamers live. He remembered the time he put in $10 and lost it all in minutes. He remembered the laughs from his friends, the looks from his parents, his own doubts. Every failure, every frustrated attempt, every sleepless night flashed by like a quick movie. And now everything made sense. Every fall was a lesson. Every stumble was a building block. Everything, absolutely everything, led him to this point. It wasn't just a win in a poker tournament. It was the biggest win of his life up to that moment. Because he didn't just win money, he won himself. After the initial shock came the second one. What to do now? That's when the reality really starts to sink in. Because one thing is dreaming of winning. Another is living after the win. He sat down again, heart still racing, and started mentally listing what he needed to do. The first thing was to take a screenshot. To keep that moment forever. Not to post it in a group or flaunt it on social media, but to remember. To never forget where he came from. Then he plugged his phone in, still half disbelieving, and thought about whether he should Tell someone. He stood still for several minutes, staring at nothing, before deciding, I need to breathe before I tell anyone. The first person to know was his mom. She was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, making breakfast. He walked in, with red eyes, wearing his old hoodie, his face a mix of euphoria and fear. He said, not knowing how to say it, Mom, I won. I won a lot. She, of course, thought he was exaggerating, but when he showed her the screen, her eyes went wide. She thought it was a lie. She needed to see it again and again. Then came the hug, strong, silent, those seconds when no words are needed, when the gesture says it all. And in that hug, he understood. This wasn't just about him. It was about her, too. About the family. About the years of effort. About the dreams she postponed so he could have choices. In the following days, the routine turned upside down. The news spread, not by him, but through social media, friends, groups. Dude, is it true you won $1 million playing poker? Teach me. Are you gonna quit everything now? He laughed but kept his feet on the ground. Most people expected to see him flaunting his win. They expected a post with champagne, sending money to everyone, endless shopping sprees. But he surprised everyone. The first thing he did was look for an accountant, then a financial planner. He wanted to understand what was possible. He wanted to organize. He wanted to use it wisely. And maybe that's where the true growth happened. He didn't get lost in the euphoria. On the contrary, he matured. He helped his parents, paid off the house debts, did some basic renovations, put money in a conservative fund, set aside some for education, his and his brother's. He started studying poker professionally. He wanted to understand the landscape, the risks, the possible paths. He went deep, and even with all that money in the bank, he still played free tournaments sometimes. Not for the money, but for the passion, for the essence. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't the money that drove him. It was the feeling of building something, of growing, of being alive. But not everything was perfect. Along with the sudden fame came sideways looks, strange proposals, opportunists. People who never said hello now showed up with amazing partnership ideas. He had to learn to say no. He had to learn to filter. He had to understand that not every compliment is sincere. And that's when he realized, winning isn't the hard part. The hard part is sustaining the victory. It's staying firm when the whole world tries to push you down paths that aren't yours. But he was ready. Because it wasn't luck. It was choice. It was a journey. It was purpose. Today, when he looks back, he doesn't see just a kid who won a tournament. He sees someone who reinvented himself, who turned a casual $10 into a new life, who turned defeat into a school, and criticism into fuel. He knows many still doubt, that some will say, oh, it was luck. But he doesn't care. Because only he knows what it took to get there. Only he knows the nights of doubt, the days of anger, the heavy silences. And that's why every penny of that win has emotional value multiplied by 1,000. The transformation was deeper than any prize could express. Now, he talks differently. He walks differently. He thinks differently. Not because he has money, but because he has a story. Because he knows what it is to believe when no one else believes. Because he's felt the taste of defeat and still decided to keep going. And that, my friend, that's priceless. But maybe the most beautiful part of all this is what he did next. What he built from there. Because the biggest change was yet to come. And then, what comes after such a life-changing turn? When the storm passes, when the screen fades to black, when the euphoric screams turn into silence, what's left? That was the question he began asking himself in the days that followed. Because winning a poker tournament, especially with a $1 million prize, is something that changes everything. But it also reveals everything. It shows who you are when no one else is watching. And he, who just weeks ago was simply the kid who played secretly in his room, now carried with him a story that inspired many. Friends, family, strangers, everyone wanted to know the secret. But he knew there was no secret. There was the courage to keep going, even when it seemed like it didn't make sense. And now, with all eyes on him, the decision ahead was bigger than any final table. What to do with all of this? Contrary to what many expected, he didn't go to Dubai, didn't rent a luxury car, didn't go around flaunting his wealth. He disappeared for a few days. He needed to think. He needed to feel. And during that time, he made a rare choice. He decided that his story wouldn't end there. That the million wouldn't be the end, it would be the beginning of a bigger mission. He used part of the money to take care of his family, pay off his parents' old debts, improve the house's structure, and ensure basic comfort. Then he organized his finances. He sought out specialists, studied investments, and learned how to protect what he had gained. But most importantly, he set aside a significant portion for education, not just for himself, but for others. He created a small online project almost casually, teaching the fundamentals of poker in an accessible, humanized way, the way he wished someone had taught him. He started sharing his journey, the mistakes, the successes, the setbacks. He talked about mindset, emotional control, the importance of knowing how to lose, and the nobility of continuing. In no time, the channel grew. He received invitations for lectures, interviews, and events. But what touched him the most were the private messages. "Your story made me believe in myself again. I was about to give up on everything, but after watching your video, I decided to try one more time." That's when he understood. The real prize wasn't in the bank account. It was right there, in that real connection with others who also carried uncertainties, fears, and the desire for a breakthrough. And even after everything, he kept saying the same thing. "I didn't know anything, but I jumped in." And sometimes, that's all you need. Simple, direct, and true. He didn't romanticize the journey, didn't sell any miracles. He just shared that, with $10, a clear idea, and the willingness to learn, life can, yes, change. And maybe the most provocative part of all this was what he said at the end of every video. What if your breakthrough is also just $10 away? Because it's not about poker. It's about chance. About giving yourself a chance. About stopping waiting for the perfect moment and doing something with what you have. He became more than a champion. He became a living example that you don't need to have everything to start, but you do need to start to have everything. And this kind of legacy, my friend, it has no end. Now answer me honestly, would you have the courage to sign up for a tournament even without knowing everything? Even without mastering every technical detail, even without any guarantee of victory, even with that voice in your head telling you you're not good enough? Because that's exactly where most people get stuck. They wait until they know everything before taking a risk. When, in reality, it's the risk that teaches you. That's what this kid did. He jumped in, even without knowing. He played scared. He messed up big time. He got mocked. But he didn't stop. And in the end, it was that boldness, that decision to try even unprepared, that flipped the switch in his life. So I ask you, what's holding you back? The fear of judgment? Imposter syndrome? Comparing yourself to others who are ahead of you? Or is it just that procrastination disguised as, it's not the right time yet? Because if it's that, maybe you're just one move away from turning it all around. And that move doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be made. Sometimes, the biggest difference between those who win and those who watch is that one clicked and the other hesitated. And the truth is, the world always favors those who act, those who try, those who fail while moving. There's no victory without vulnerability. There's no comeback without exposure. And the question remains, are you ready to put yourself in that place? Now tell me, which move do you think changed his destiny? Was it the bold bluff on the river, the call and the final heads up? Or maybe it was the quiet decision not to quit in the beginning, when everything seemed to go wrong? Drop a comment here. I want to know. I want to hear from you. Because your insight might just be the spark that inspires someone else here. And who knows, maybe you'll be at the center of the next story. Subscribe to the channel now, hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapters, and, of course, share this video with that friend who's always doubting themselves. Yeah, that one who always says, "It's not for me." But you know there's a giant world asleep inside them. Go ahead, plant that seed, and who knows, maybe they'll surprise you in the next comeback.